never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion. Got my statement, and I'm reading it slow so I can understand it fully. Appreciate my standing, go out of this world and right on time. Oh, never in my life have I seen the sky light up like this. I'm far away from Earth and I wanna know if you exist. Mission control, do you read me? Send me my coordinates lately. Mission control, am I drifting? Tie me to someone who will love me. Yeah, wait, I think I'll last a bit longer. Find another.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. It is a Wednesday, so of course it's time for another weekly Top 10 Countdown. We do one each and every Wednesday here on the channel. And honestly, today's Top 10 Countdown was actually one that I didn't decide on until about 6:30 Eastern Time last night, because since it's still college football season as we head toward the Army-Navy game this Saturday, and then of course next weekend bowl games start, I was going to do a Top 10 Countdown that was about college football in some way, shape, or form. And then about 6:30 Eastern Time last night, I said, nah, I'm going to go a different route and do a Top 10 Countdown on something I haven't done one about in a while, and that's college basketball. Now, I have done some Top 10 Countdowns about college basketball, but it has been a minute. So I figured it's time to go ahead and talk some college basketball again, since we did the AP poll yesterday. Today's Top 10 Countdown is going to be the top 10 all-time most viewed college basketball games. And the reason why I am doing this is because, of course, it's college basketball season now. And I was reading an article yesterday about the Ohio State and Michigan game in college football 2 weekends ago being the highest rated college football game of the season as far as TV viewership goes. So I thought, why don't we look at viewership for college basketball? Now, if you've seen any of these games, you have to either be at least 45, 50 years old, or you have to be a college basketball historian that goes back and watches old games in some way, shape, or form on some outlet, because none of these games are from the 21st century, and only a couple of them are from the 90s. Most of them are from the 70s and the 80s, and that's why I say you have to either be 45, 50 years old or a college basketball historian, because anybody young has not seen any of these games unless you go watch them on some kind of outlet that shows old college basketball games. This article came out August the 9th of this year, and it's from WholeHogSports.com. Number 10, UCLA versus Kentucky from 1975, and it had 30.09 million viewers. Number 9, North Carolina versus Georgetown, and it had 30.59 million viewers, and that game was from 1982. Number 8, Michigan versus the Seton Hall Pirates from 1989, had 31.12 million viewers. Number 7, from 1985, 31.23 million viewers for the Villanova Wildcats and the Georgetown Hoyas. Number 6 from 1987, 32.06 million viewers for Indiana versus Syracuse. And before we talk about the top 5, let's recap numbers 10 through 6. Number 10, 1975, UCLA versus Kentucky. Number 9, North Carolina versus Georgetown, 1982. Number 8, Michigan versus Seton Hall, 1989. Number 7, Villanova versus Georgetown, 1985. And number 6, Indiana versus Syracuse, 1987. And again, this is the top 10 all-time highest rated TV viewership college basketball games from Whole Hog Sports from August the 9th. And if you look up any of these games on the internet, you'll realize that every single one of them has something to do with March Madness, whether it's right before the tournament started or in the tournament or the national championship game. And that's, of course, because people are going to watch the national championship game. In most sports, except college football, the viewership always goes way up. You look at the NFL, and the Super Bowl generally is the highest rated TV viewership game of the season because even the casual fan will watch the Super Bowl. So that's just the way it is, and that's why so many of these games are linked to the tournament, because a lot of people won't even watch college basketball until tournament time. They'll watch the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season and determine off of that who's good, who's not, and then they're done with it until either conference tournament time or NCAA tournament time, because the basketball season is so long, especially now when you've got a tournament that's 68 teams. Unless you pull for a team like I do that's just not any good, if your team wins 17, 18 games and loses 12, 13 games, generally they're still going to be in the tournament. So why waste all that time watching all those games during the season when your team is still going to make it? And that's been my biggest complaint about the college football playoff field expanding. And I'm going off on a tangent here. I'll get back to the top 5 here in a minute. But my biggest complaint about college football expanding the 12 teams is the fact that you're watering down the regular season. And to me, that's what makes college football so special, is it's the only sport to where every single game is important. Because if you lose that one regular season game, especially 2, as we've seen with the playoff, if you lose 2 games, you're not going to the playoffs. There has yet to be a 2-loss team make the playoffs. So it makes every single game feel like you have to win. And all of a sudden, if you expand to 12 teams, there's going to be 9-3 teams make the playoffs, especially for these teams now that have been good for 7, 8 years, like Alabama, like Ohio State, like Georgia, like Clemson. Those teams who have established themselves as consistent top 10 teams, when the playoff field goes to 12 teams, they can go 9-3, and they're in the playoffs. So let's say it's early November, the first Saturday in November, and you're a Georgia fan, and Georgia's fixing to line up and play Tennessee. But Georgia is 10-0, so if they lose this game, doesn't matter. They're in the playoffs. What's more important, winning one more game or being healthy going into the playoffs? So you turn on the TV to watch Georgia play Tennessee, and guess what? Georgia's quarterback ain't playing. Georgia's running back ain't playing. Their wide receivers ain't playing. And if you don't believe that's what's going to happen, you're a fool. You look at the NFL, and every single year, with 2 to 3 weeks to go in the regular season, whichever team has clinched home field advantage in the NFC and the AFC, they bench all their starters. If that happens in the NFL, it'll happen in college. So all of a sudden, you're wanting to watch your team play one of their biggest rivals and the entire starting lineup is on the bench. It waters down the regular season and it makes it not mean as much. Not only that, but people are selfish. The college basketball tournament used to be 32 teams. We went to 64, and now we've gone to 68. Major League Baseball used to have one wild card team in each division, and now we have 3. As soon as we go to 12 teams, within 5 years, they're going to want to go to 16. And then within 2 years, they're going to want to go to 20. And next thing you know, there'll be 75 teams in the playoffs, and it's pointless. It's stupid. But when I was reading about Ohio State and Michigan having all those views, I thought, I need to do a video about viewership in college football. And then last night, around 6:30 Eastern time, I decided to do one about college basketball because it is college basketball season now, and we have not talked college basketball as far as top 10 in a while. But number 5 from 1983, 32.14 million viewers for NC State versus Houston. Number 4, 1994, 32.73 million viewers, Arkansas versus Duke. Number 3, North Carolina versus Michigan from 1993, 32.94 million viewers. Number 2, from 1992, 34.31 million viewers for the Duke Blue Devils and the Michigan Wolverines. And the highest rated TV viewership game of all time in college basketball happened in the national championship game in 1979. And that was the Michigan State Spartans and the Indiana State Sycamores. Now, if you're just a casual college basketball fan and you're not a historian and you're not old enough to recall this game, let me give you a couple of details on why the game was so highly rated. 1979, Michigan State had a player named Earvin Johnson, who of course is better known as Magic Johnson, and Indiana State had a player named Larry Bird. So that national championship game was Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird. And what's funny about that was those two guys went on to the NBA and were still bitter rivals who played for two teams that totally hate each other in the NBA. And they played in the national championship game in 1979. A lot of people don't realize that Larry Bird played for Indiana State because it's such a small school. They are called the Indiana State Sycamores. And when Larry Bird played there, they were really, really good. But they've been really, really bad now for pretty much about 30 years. They might have an occasional year where they make a little bit of noise, but not that much. But we also got to remember back in those days, not only was Indiana State good, but so was Houston. Now, of course, Houston's been good the last couple of years. But up until they got the coach they have now, Houston's been awful for 20 years. But back in the 80s and 90s, they were really, really good. Seton Hall used to be really, really good. And Georgetown, I can recall when I first started watching basketball in the mid-90s, Georgetown was really, really, really good when they had John Thompson as their coach. But now, not so much. So just like college football had a lot of teams that used to be really, really good, and they're not anymore, college basketball did as well. Any thoughts on this week's Top 10 Countdown? Please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What do cows read the most? Catalogs. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.